Hey guys, in this tutorial we are going to see how to do unit testing in Spring. In the previous tutorials we had seen how to use JUnit and so here also you can just use the JUnit library just to write your unit tests. But with Spring, the thing is that we need all the things to be properly uh, configured and auto-wired and stuff like that. And hence we need to do a few more things to be able to do unit testing. So let's just do one thing. As per Maven, we have our source main Java folder over here, right? And all our unit tests goes into source test Java. So I've created this package com incref employee over here, and let's say I create a class called let's say util test. Well, let's see if we can pick up a better name inside our service. Well, let's say we have this normalize function, right? So let's just call it uh, employee service test. All right, and then you can just basically, if you want to just test this static method, you can just name it as public void test normalize. All right, and you just write add test over here from JUnit, and we can just say employee Pojo P equal to new employee Pojo P dot set. So it's storing names as lowercase. P dot set name as Romel Jan, and then employee service dot let's make this a public method, okay, or protected is even better, uh, so that it's accessible from my test case, uh, because it will be in the same package but not anywhere else. So first we need to change the package name. We'll just say employee dot service. All right. All right, and now I should be able to do employee service dot normalize p. And the way you run things in JUnit is it let's say equals. I'm expecting all smaller case and then p dot get name. All right. Um, and I have a trim method over here also. So maybe I'll just put a space over here just to ensure that trim works. And all you can do in Eclipse is right click, run as JUnit test, and my test runs just fine. If I was expecting a wrong value, if I coded my test case incorrectly, then my test case would fail, right? Okay, and the effect of it is if I go into my employee Spring folder and I run Maven clean install, I should see my test running. Right, so if you see one test run and no failures. Now we want to be able to test our actual methods over here, right? So using the power of Spring, I should be able to do at auto wired. This won't work, but I'm just giving you a demo. And I say private employee service. All right, service. And let's say we want to test the add method. All right, test add, and right, so like this, and then I do service dot add p. Okay, and this is another test. Now I can also do a right click over here and try to run the JUnit test, and I see this one passed, but here I have null pointer exception. The reason for this is, well, when we are running a Spring web application, remember that Tomcat picks up a init servlet that is provided by Spring and runs it. Tomcat is a program that's already running, and then init servlet provided by Spring then scans um, everything, right? Basically, that servlet will be able to discover our Spring configuration, and then from the Spring configuration, all the scanning happens and everything gets auto wired, and then Spring ensures that everything is properly configured, auto wired, etc., etc. But in this case, it's the IDE which is trying to run this test. So IDE doesn't know about this, right? Um, and so in Spring, if you want to run this sort of a test, we need to do few funny configurations. So first of all, let's just create a class called abstract unit test. All right, and let's just make it abstract, and our test will extend our abstract unit test. Okay, now now I want to run all instances or all subclasses of abstract unit test using uh, something that can initialize Spring, correct? And again, so for this, um, see, just look over here. If you'll just look over here, my JUnit version is 4.12. Okay, and what you can do is you have once you have included this dependency, you can say, hey, run with, okay, Spring JUnit 4 class runner. Okay. All right. It's at, I think. Yeah. All right. So at run with is uh, coming from my JUnit library, and here, whenever JUnit now tries to run, since I've annotated this abstract class and hence this concrete class, JUnit will then try to run the tests with this class, and this class will be responsible for initializing Spring, right? So it's Spring JUnit 4 class runner, but as you can see, it's not resolved. And so this class, if you just Google it up, right? Uh, this class comes from another Spring framework library called Spring Test. And so I'm just going to include this library here. All right, all my test libraries are over here. All right. And now you see this is available. All right. Um, and so now let's see if this runs. It probably won't, but let's see what happens. Okay. All right. Now it says failed to load application context. Okay, so what's the reason for this? The reason for this is that although okay, let's just copy this entire trace and have a look at this. Okay, so it is saying there was some context Spring context loader which was not able to load application context. And so the reason for this is, although I've told at runway to use this class, but I've not told it how to configure Spring, correct? um, and so what we need to do is we have to tell it that the configuration needs to be loaded, okay, from spring config.class, which is this one over here, which will then tell Spring to scan everything, load the properties, etc., and and load it using annotation config web context loader.class. So all 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 it's trying to do is, this might look like a little complex, but all it's trying to say is that, hey, so all we are trying to do is to test Spring over here, sorry, JUnit over here, that run with a JUnit uh, provider given by Spring, and then to this provider we are saying, hey, load load your Spring configuration from this class, and then use this loader to load configuration from this class. All right. Uh, so now let's try to see what happens. Okay. So now what is happening over here is it's saying cannot load web application context from web merged context configuration. Again, this all might look hairy, and as I've been telling you in Spring tutorials, that once it is all configured properly, it all works just fine. And apparently, I mean, we did some research and we found that I think what you need is that, hey, this is ultimately a web application, right? Because you have your REST controllers and stuff like that, and so load your web app configuration from some folder like source test web app, and all we need to do is just provide a folder over here called web app. um, well, let us see if this works. If it doesn't, then I might need to debug it again. um, and let's see. All right, so my Spring configuration is getting loaded and everything is there, I mean, as it should be, and things are working just fine. And if I go into MySQL Workbench, the question is, should I see now a Pojo with the name Romil Jan in the database? Okay, so you see over here, but let's delete everything. All right, and let's run again. All right, so you see, now the problem with this approach is that every time I test, correct, uh, I will see same entries getting into the database again and again. And this is okay for a very small toy project like Employee Spring, but when you're working on large projects, you want certain data to be able, I mean, you won't be able to reuse certain data, and this causes problem, right? And so the beauty of Spring is that you can just say, hey, all my methods are transactional, all right? Uh, and once now Spring runs these test unit using JUnit, it will automatically roll back those transactions. So then you won't see them into the database. All right. So now my tests were still successful and I run them. That should not have happened. 1 second. So delete, apply, finish. It's all empty. Let's see what happens now. Well, it's still over here. Let me see. Let me try to debug what went wrong over here. That should not have been the case. Okay, folks, so I found the bug, and which is that if you look over here, uh, I can just go and do schema inspector and go to tables. And if you look over here, the engine is my ISAM. Now, MySQL is two engines, which is one is my ISAM and other one is InnoDB. Um, Engines are just the way uh, they implement transactionality, asset properties, etc. And MySQL provides two different engines for various purposes. You can go and look over it on the internet. And the reason these tables are getting created with my ISM engine is that in the properties I'm using MySQL 5 dialect, and my ISM engine does not support transactionality. We always want to be using InnoDB engine for transactionality. And so the solution to this is I'll just go and delete my tables. Okay, and here I'm going to use MySQL 5 InnoDB dialect. Okay, and now if I run my test, all right, let's go over here and refresh. Now you see that the tables are getting created using InnoDB engine, and now if I do select star, you see nothing uh, is remaining in the database. Okay, so let's get back to our test cases. So I have my employee service test. All right, and well, I can just add any number of tests over here, just like this. So there's an about app service, right? And I can add about app service test, and here let's just add this service, and well, let's say we want to do test get name, and well, just do test service APIs, and I can do assert equals service dot get name as something, and service dot get version as something, and my expected values are coming from my properties. So version is 1.0 and name is employee application. All right, and now I can just right click on the entire package and do run as and did and just run JUnit tests, and both of my tests are passing fine. And the final thing is always try to do Maven clean install and see that your tests are running in Maven as well. All right, so tests run 3. It's showing 3 because There's one test over here and two tests over here. Now I want to add something more. So if you as a developer just want to check out this code and see if it builds, there's a little bit of setup because you will need to um, create the database, give permissions to a user, and then configure the properties, and all of this becomes little problematic, and we want to avoid this. And so we are going to use an in-memory database called H2. So let's see. So if I go over here, do I have H2? Yeah, H21491. Okay. Uh, and now if I go into my POM, all right, here I can just say h2.version, right? And again, just to be sure, the version was 1.4.91. So 1.4.91, and let's just search it up on Google. H2 version or H2 Maven. All right, so okay, let's just pick up the latest one, 14200. And I want this to be available in test scope only. All right, and I'll do $h2.version, and yeah, there we have it. Okay. So when the war is getting built, H2 will not get supplied uh, to the war, but while running tests, H2 can be used. But now we need to uh, do a little bit of other things to ensure that H2 is getting used in the test. Um, so first of all, I also don't want my test cases to be picking up employee.properties, because sometimes, and many times actually, that uh, this gets dependent on your local machine. So in our test cases, let's create a file called a folder called resources, and again within this package, hopefully I can do it this way, com incref.employee. No, it's not allowing me. So um, I'm just gonna create from here source test resources, new folder com incref and employee. Okay, and here I can have a file called config.properties. Let's rename it to test.properties. Okay, so refresh, and let's copy all of these values over here. Now in my test.properties, I want to be using a different driver for H2. All right. Let me see if I can find the right settings from another project. So, all right. So the way you do it is that the JDBC driver is different. All right, and I'm telling H2 to use a database called test and in memory, and username passwords are just sort of default, and we would want to be using H2 dialect. All right, and everything sort of remains the same. Okay, now if I go into my abstract unit test, it's still using my Spring config, and which is trying to read from my employee.properties. And I want the configuration to be using my test.properties. So let's just copy Spring config over here. Okay, and we can call it as, let us say, QA config. QA stands for QA, quality assurance or testing. And while running my test, now I'll ask my Spring to use QA config. Okay, which is this file. So I've made my testing process independent of the production class spring.config. Now it's using QA config, and now here I can configure it to use com slash incref slash employee slash test.property. So I'm asking it to pick it up from the class path. All right, so let us see if all of this works. Sure, there would be some bug, but we'll fix it. Well, it worked. Sorry, I had to pause, so I don't know where I left, but a quick way to test that H2 database in memory database is getting used is by deleting the tables. And let's run this again. Uh, and well, my table still got created. Okay. The reason for that is, well, my QA config class is still scanning everything over here, and hence it's scanning Spring config, and which is then picking up employee properties. So I need to tell my QA config to ignore the Spring config class. So uh, let's see. The way to do that is, I'll just check the code. Yeah, so here I'm saying scan com incref employee, but ignore spring config.class. All right, let's try this once again. Drop table, and now let's run this once again. And refreshes, no tables are getting created. Finally, so my tests, I mean, I can just basically check out this code and run maven clean install and everything should work. But let's say if I do maven jetty colon run, right, because I want my data to be in database when I'm running the application. If I do maven jetty colon run, this should pick up my spring config file and not QA config file, and create the tables over here. So yes, in this case, this is working just fine. Now Um, Again, you can find all of this code um in Git at this location. All right. So I will be checking all of this code over here, so you can just check it out and just use it as is. So let me just do that. Yeah. Training. Okay. Added Spring JUnit tests, and now it should be available to you after this. Thank you, folks.